you so very much. Thank you. Governor Otter, thank you so very much. And Lori Otter, what a wonderful First Lady you have. What a great state this is. You're lucky to live here. You know, I had the fun of living in your state one summer. I was 15 years old. I worked on a ranch in King Hill, not far from Glens Ferry. You know where that is? All right. And it was so much fun. I learned so much about cultivating corn and spraying corn and irrigating corn. I thought I'd never see the end of corn. And it was such a thrill to be here. And then when things really got good, we got to come to the Snake River Stampede and watch some cowboys and cowgirls. As I recall, Loretta Lynn sang that night at the Snake River Stampede. This is such a beautiful place to be. I love being back here. I remember this where my dad actually lived part of his life, a good part of his life in Rexburg, and loved being here. And actually this factory, Guerdon Industries, this kind of is home in some respects for me, not just because they make homes, but because my dad, later in his life, became head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And he used to make cars on an assembly line. He made Ramblers, all right? And some of you remember Ramblers. And he said, you know, someday we got to be able to make homes like we make cars on an assembly line. And so he worked very hard to get the building codes to change and to allow homes to be made like they're finally being made here. So I feel another attachment to this place, not just Idaho, but to this very place itself. Now, I want to remind you of something. I'm told, I love that scream, whoever it is, you keep it up. I've got a note here in my pocket, and it said, remind the people there's a caucus on March 6th. Now, I think you know that. But I need you guys to find out where your caucus location is, and you can do that by going to our website, mittromney.com. You need to find out where your caucus site is, and then I guess it's at 7 o'clock in the evening. You got to be there a few minutes before. You listen to a speech or two, and then you get to vote. And I need your vote because I want to be president. You know, when I was a boy, I got the chance to see Idaho in one of its most beautiful places, which was the Idaho Wilderness area. We went on a float trip on a dory down the middle fork of the Salmon River. And oh, what a spectacular opportunity that was with my dad and my brother. And you know, it followed on from the tradition we had in my family. My mom and dad had 25 grandkids. And when they had a group of them that reached the age of 10 or 11 or 12, maybe 3 or 4 of them, they'd put them in their car. This time it was a Ford van, and they'd drive for 30 straight days across America, going from national park to national park. And they did that so the kids could learn to love America. And I knew that because I'd been on that trip myself. When I was a boy, they took us around in the Rambler from site to site, park to park to park. And I learned to love the beauty of this country and the people of this country I've come to love over the years. We're an extraordinary people. The great part of this campaign I've had was the chance to meet people, is the chance I have to meet people from all over the country, to see their patriotism, to see their love of America. It's a remarkable country that we live in. And what breaks your heart is to see how many people in this country are having tough times right now. And there are a lot of people out of work. Almost 24 million people in America out of work or stopped looking for work, or only in part-time jobs and they need full-time work. And you got people who are planning on retiring thinking this was going to be the best time of their life, and now they wonder if they can put food on the table at the end of the week. You got kids who were thinking of going to college, and now they wonder, can they possibly afford it? You've got folks who, at the end of the week, were thinking about what movie they'd see. Now they're thinking about what they could possibly feed their family. Do you know the median income in America in the last 4 years has dropped by 10%? Even as your gasoline prices are up and your health care costs are up, food prices are up. This president has failed the American people. It's time to change. He said He said shortly after he was elected, he was on TV and he said, if I can't turn around this economy in 3 years, I'll be looking at a one-term proposition. We're here to collect. We're taking it back. I'm so troubled as I've seen what he's done. Almost everything he's done, in my view, is the exact opposite of what's needed to get this country growing again and put people back to work. If I'm president, I understand how the economy works because I've worked in the economy. I think to create jobs, it helps to have had a job. I watched him the other night. I watched him the other night. He came out with his new budget. You probably saw that. It was on the evening news. Another $1 trillion deficit. Another $1 trillion deficit. I agree. This, when he was running for office, he said he'd cut the deficit in half. Well, his deficit is now twice as large as any that George Bush put in place. He's on track to put in place as much debt, public debt, almost as all the prior presidents combined. It's a record of disappointment, and a record he can't possibly be proud of. He said that he deserves a second term. I don't think so. I think he deserves to be sent home and back to the private sector. This is going to be a campaign in part about who can actually be a fiscal conservative, who actually is a deficit hawk, who will stop spending more money than we take in and spending our kids' future. And I believe it's immoral and bad economics to spend what we don't have. I will stop the spending in Washington. And by the way, I don't have to learn how to be a fiscal conservative or a deficit hawk. You see, if you've worked in business, you're automatically a fiscal conservative, because if you're not, you're out of business, all right? You can't spend more money than you take in every year. So I've lived it. And then I took my business experience to my state. And every year for 4 years, I balanced the budget. We cut taxes 19 times. I want to make sure we finally balance the federal budget, and I'll do it. This president, we thought was going to try and get us towards a more balanced budget. He is not. He's done just the opposite. 4 years of $1 trillion-plus deficits. And you know, there are a bunch of Republicans running. Well, we're down to 4 now, but there were a bunch. Now we're 4. And of those 4, we'll all hear people talk about what they'll do to try and shrink the size of the federal government and to cut back on spending. But you have to look at people's records as well as their words. And I know that Senator Santorum is getting his moment in the spotlight now, which is a good thing. I hope people take a very close look at his record, because he was in Congress for about 20 years, and during that time, the size of the federal government doubled during his time in office. And by the way, he voted to raise the debt ceiling 5 different times without compensating cuts. And he's a big proponent of earmarks. He voted for billions of dollars of earmarks, including the bridge to nowhere. If you want a fiscal conservative, you can't vote for Rick Santorum, because he's not. He's not a deficit hawk. He says he's not a deficit hawk. I am. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'll balance the budget. I'll get America back on track economically. Now there's some other big differences between the course that I would take for America and the course that this president's taking. I've just mentioned spending and balancing our budget. Let me mention another one, energy. You just heard the governor talk about energy. You know, there was a no-brainer decision that had to get made by the president. There are very few no-brainer decisions. But this was about whether we should get oil from a Keystone pipeline in Canada. He made the wrong choice. I'll make the right choice. We'll get oil from Canada. And by the way, this president, I know he likes solar energy and wind energy. So do I. We all like those sources of energy. But I also believe we have to have gas and coal and oil and nuclear. And if I'm president of the United States, I will make sure we develop our energy resources and become energy secure in this country. The president also seems to be partial to something I call crony capitalism. The idea of crony capitalism is that the people with the money, the government, they give it to their cronies, all right? And how do they do that? Well, various ways. First of all, the people who elected the president were the bosses of organized unions. And so he makes sure they're taken care of. He stacks the National Labor Relations Board with people who tell Boeing they can't build a factory in South Carolina. That's crony capitalism. And then he takes your money to give it to the companies of the people who gave him money in his campaign. And I know he wants to encourage solar energy, for instance, and so he gave $500 million to Solyndra. And he's given money to Tesla and Fisker and Enterone and other enterprises, all with the idea of taking your money and investing it into different businesses. Hasn't worked out so well so far. And by the way, and think about this. Now, I spent some time trying to help businesses get started. That was the business I was in. Starting businesses or helping businesses try and turn around or become more successful. And so I've known something about how to get businesses going and what happens when the government starts playing crony capitalist. Let me just give you an example of this. When the president put $500 million into Solyndra, think about what happened. You might say, well, that was to try and encourage solar energy. It did just the opposite. My guess is that there were at least 100 entrepreneurs in America that had their own ideas for solar energy and were coming up with new ideas, and they went to venture capitalists and to angel investors and maybe to their family and said, would you invest in my idea? And they were looking at those ideas, and then the president gave $500 million to his favorite. Guess what happens to all the others? No one wants to invest in a little business when they see the government's picked the winner already. And so what the president did by putting $500 million in Solyndra was not just to waste our money. What the president did was to make it harder for entrepreneurs in this country to come up with their new ideas. He did not create growth and opportunity. He instead stifled it. This is a president, I think he thinks that government knows better than we do how to manage our own health care. That government should guide our health care system, tell us what kind of health care insurance we can have, tell us what kind of treatment we can have. Look, if I'm president, I will repeal Obamacare and return the responsibility of health care to the citizens of America and the states. You know, I watch what the president's been doing overseas. You recall when he was running for office, he said he was going to meet in his first year with the world's worst actors, Ahmadinejad, Chavez, Kim Jong-il, Castro. He didn't meet with any of them, by the way. I don't think they wanted to meet. He held out his hand, and they put up a clenched fist. He had the view that we have common interests, all the people. He's wrong. There's some people that want to oppress other people. America has been a nation that stood up against the oppressors of the world and freed more people than any of the people in the history of the earth. He went around the world apologizing for America. He said that America had dictated to other nations. No, Mr. President, America has freed people from dictators. That's the real story of America. His foreign policy is combined with the idea that if we just make America weak enough, people will like us more. That seems to be the attitude of what's going on. I mean, our Navy, do you know how small it is now? It's smaller than any time since 1917. Our Air Force is smaller and older than any time since the founding of the Air Force in 1947. The world is a more dangerous place, and yet the president wants to reduce our number of troops by 50 to 100,000. My own view is very different. I believe the best ally peace has ever known is a strong America. And so I will add to ships, add aircraft, add to personnel in our military, and make sure our veterans get the care they deserve. I want America to be so strong, no one would ever think of testing the might of the American military. And so the people of America have a choice. You have a choice as to whether we're going to follow the path of Barack Obama down a course to become more and more like a European social welfare state. With a president who says he's going to fundamentally transform America. I don't want to transform America. I want to restore to America the principles that made us the hope of the earth. And so that other pathway makes America stronger, with stronger values, stronger economy, stronger military. And you have within our own party different people to choose from. We can all talk pretty well. I'm sure some talk better than others. But in terms of who's actually done it, who's actually led a business, who's actually turned around a business, who's actually helped turn around an Olympics, who's led a state, I'm the only guy that's done that. So I want your help. If you want a fiscal conservative, you're going to have to vote for me. I'm a deficit hawk and a fiscal conservative, and I'll get our budget balanced. I love you too. I said at the outset that I love this country. I love its land. I love its people. I love the hymns of America. There's one called America the Beautiful, which is one of my favorites. That first verse, oh beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty across the fruited plain. What a beautiful place this is. This is that place, right, with the majestic mountains, the amber waves of grain. I love the beauty of the land. I love the other verses. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Would our veterans and members of the armed services please raise your hands so we can recognize you and your service. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. I had the fun of being out with John McCain and introducing him as one of America's heroes. I'll tell you, the crowds go wild when you see one of our brave men like that. And I appreciate the many men and women in this room who raised their hand and were recognized. I know there's another verse that maybe is not quite so familiar, but has meaning for me. It's, oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. Patriot dream that sees beyond the years. The idea of the songwriter was that the patriots, the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, were not just writing for their times, but they instead were writing for periods beyond their years, into our years. And when the Declaration of Independence said this, that we were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, not our state, not our king, but our Creator, they changed the perspective of the world. And the message of freedom began to spread across this nation, across the nation, but across the world. And they said among those rights were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In America, citizens would be free to pursue happiness as they choose, rather than being limited by the place or circumstance of birth, or by being told by government what they could do, or being raised in one class and not being allowed to move to another. Americans were free and could pursue happiness as they choose. And because of these freedoms and the brilliance of the founders and their inspiration, in my view, we became the land of opportunity on the planet. Everybody who wanted to be a pioneer, an innovator, a creator, they came here by the millions and millions. That's who we are. That's who America is. I don't think the president understands that like you do. I think the president thinks that what makes us great is a government telling us how we can do a better job in our businesses and in our homes, trying to tell us what to do. He's wrong. The strength of America is free people pursuing their dreams, and always will be. As I look at the many challenges facing America, the right course is not to become more like Europe, with a larger and larger government, with bigger and bigger debts, with greater and greater intrusion into the life of our citizens. It's instead to restore the principles that made America, America, our belief in life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, freedom and free enterprises growing and thriving. And by the way, for those that have been successful and achieved greatness, Ladd here and this enterprise that you've created, they don't make us poorer. They make us better off. We celebrate success in this country. We don't demonize it like this president does. I I want to remind you, March 6th, 7 o'clock, I need you all to vote. You're not old enough to vote, but anybody who's old enough or close, get out there and vote at that caucus. I need your help. I want you to know this. If I'm your president, both in the campaign and if I become president, I'll tell you the truth. I will tell you the truth, and number one. And number two, I'll live with integrity. I won't embarrass you in the White House. And number three, I'll do everything in my power to help you get better jobs with rising incomes. And number four, I'll draw on your patriotism. I'll ask you for sacrifice to help rebuild this great country and to pass on to our kids a nation that remains the shining city on a hill. I love America. I need your help. I want to make sure we keep this nation the hope of the earth. Thank you so very much. Great to be with you. Thank you.